Abandon my mother for your mistress? Watch as you lose everything you worked for.
The background.
Midway through my senior year at college, my father got the privilege of opening the first plant in China when his company was granted permission. He was getting everything, and I mean everything. Business class on airfare, a penthouse, recognition in the company for being effectively in charge of the project, mingling with higher-ups in the company, the works. This was exciting news for him because he was close to retirement, and it seemed that his hard work was finally paying off. My mum was happy because now with my younger brother starting college, and me about to graduate, she and her husband of over 30 years could now enjoy their empty nest. She loves us dearly, but she called my father her soulmate and wanted to spend their golden years together. However, things turned upside down in less than a year. Maybe the power went to his head. Maybe he was overwhelmed and stressed out with having to start a new life in a new country. Or maybe it brought out the ugliness that was already in his soul. I have no clue. I finished my senior year around Christmas time, only to see my father pack up his bags and leave us, saying he didn't want to be married to my mum anymore, and was seeing someone else. To say the rug had been pulled out from under our feet was an understatement. It was like everything we had ever known had imploded. My father left us shortly before Christmas, and we started putting the pieces back together. I started working 2 jobs and slipping money into my mom's wallet because I was terrified my father would cut off our money. It was during this time we started therapy, and all 3 of us came to the realization that this man had been emotionally, verbally, and financially abusing us for years. It's something I'm still trying to work through, and I doubt I'll ever fully recover. Come springtime, my father had a change of heart. He contacted us and started making amends. Something in me was suspicious and held back. But I was happy because Mum was happy. She'd lost a lot of weight, was crying constantly, and was all in all miserable. He returned home for a 2-week vacation and then proposed a 3rd honeymoon, if you will. He and Mum would return to China to work things out. My brother and I were staying back home as we were both busy with work and school. Mum and Father left us with some important numbers to call them in case of an emergency. The email address of my father's immediate supervisor, whom I'll call Stan, and weekly Skype sessions so we could stay in touch. Mum and Father left for China, and it seemed that everything would work out. 2 weeks later, it was time for our weekly Skype session. The first week had been fine, and my brother and I were expecting to hear another good report. Instead of that, Mum was alone, her eyes swollen and her face red. I immediately went into Mama Bear mode and asked my mum in a voice that probably scared my brother and Mum.
What happened?
Mum, crying, tells us that after making the rounds with the higher-ups, my father had packed his bags, told her he was going to Shanghai for 2 weeks with his girlfriend, and then told Mum, "I want you gone by the time I get back." Mum, floored by this, asked him, "How?" Father said, "I don't care how." Then he left my mother in the penthouse with little food, no clean water to drink. We'd been warned to never drink the water in China because it was nasty to say the least. And no way to navigate through a country where she didn't speak the language, or get a way home. She said, "I think he was using me to look great at work. Everyone was saying they were glad we were working out our problems." When I heard that, my fury boiled. I am fiercely protective of my family and friends. You can do whatever you want to me, but make any of my family members or friends cry, and you'll learn why it's a bad idea to pick on them. As much as I wanted to fly over to China, track down my father and his mistress, and make them feel every ounce of pain my mother was feeling, I knew that wasn't a smart or practical idea. Instead, I'd have to embarrass him so everyone knew what a scumbag he is. And an idea came to mind.
The plan.
After getting the information I needed from Mum and calming her down, I worked on the first part of my plan, bringing Mum home. I didn't have any money, nor did I have a visa to visit. However, I did have Stan's email. Using the skills I honed for my creative writing and general business studies, I wrote a lengthy email to Stan, crying over the keyboard as I drafted it. I explained who I was, what was going on, and that I was worried for Mum. I asked him to please help me find a way to reach my mum and bring her home. I promised him that I would repay every penny, even if it took the rest of my life. I added my personal email and phone number as a finishing touch, and asked him to contact me if he had any questions. After making sure it was perfect, a key lesson from my creative writing professor, make sure your writing is razor sharp, I sent it off, along with a prayer that it would work. Stan never did return my email. But 24 hours later, Mum was safely home. I learned that Stan had gotten in contact with my mum within an hour of me sending the email, verified everything that had happened, and gotten her home on the first flight. I sent him another email thanking him for helping us, and told him I would repay the expense when I could. That time, he did respond and said, "It's alright. Thank you though." That was the extent of our conversation, but I am still very grateful to him for helping Mum, out of his own pocket if I'm not mistaken. He's earned my respect, and I hope, wherever he is, he's doing well. When Mum got home, it sunk in for us that the marriage was truly over, and we made plans to move on. They were divorced within a year, and we moved to Florida for a fresh start maybe a few years later. Mum found the new love of her life, who I call my stepdad, is working her dream job, something that never would have happened under my father, and is happier than I've seen her in a long time. My brother and I are both making our way in the world and finding ourselves after spending our lives as our father's perfect children. As time passed, I actually forgot about the email, until recently when Mum and I were talking about Stan, and she revealed what had happened. The aftermath. I was just hoping to humiliate my father. Instead, my email launched massive legal and financial headaches for my father. Right after helping my mum get home, Stan decided that my father's behavior was worrying, because if he's using his wife to hide the fact he has a mistress, what else is he hiding? And started an investigation into my father. What he learned was mind-blowing. Not only was his mistress one of his subordinates, which is strictly against company rules for reasons I can't remember, but he had another mistress on the side, both of whom he was plying with expensive gifts and vacations, to name a few. But that wasn't the topper. What was evidence that my father might have been embezzling money from the company during his time in China. However, for reasons that I don't know, criminal charges were out of the question. Instead, what they did to him, my father no doubt thinks, was even worse. My father was immediately demoted and sent home. His name was removed from the factory he had built, and his mistresses fired. Now, with this company, most of the promotions come not from what you know, but who you know. And since Stan knows many people, eventually my father was forced to retire early before they fired him. He decided he had been discriminated against, and tried to sue the company for unlawful termination. However, the evidence against him was overwhelming, and he lost. Now he's disgraced, hated by nearly everyone, and with limited contact with his family and friends. He's still convinced that he's an innocent victim, and that time will prove him right. But everyone knows the truth. Do I feel guilty about helping to bring down my father? I'll let Montrese's motto be my answer. Nemo me impone lacessit. I'm really glad your father got what he deserved, and your mother has a better life now. All I hope right now is that you and your brother heal well, and live your lives fully and happily. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe to Reddit Originals for more videos like this. We upload a video each day, so stay tuned.